minutes? What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. When I have 5 left, I think I can hurry up.
Good.
Let
Okay.
me share
So
screen.
Santiago is there.
Hola, Carlos.
¿Cómo va, Santiago?
Muy bien.
Hola.
Hola,
So
Santiago.
good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on crime. I'm going to present a paper about market access and the decision to commit a crime, where we use a construction of a new subway line in Santiago and see its impact on crime. This is joint work with Kenzo Asahi, Patricio Dominguez, and Miguel de Uruarrizaga. We are all from PUC, Chile, different places though. Kenzo is from the public policy school, Patricio from engineering, and I'm from economics. So we know since early contributions that improved transport infrastructure has effects that go well beyond travel time savings. In the recent quantitative spatial models of cities has been shown to be a key determinant of the spatial allocation of economic activity. And the main mechanism is improved access to the labor market for individuals, what is sometimes called the commuter market access or simply market access. These 2 recent papers by Tsivanidis shows that the benefits in Bogota of opening a BRT system, the general equilibrium and reallocation effects can account from between 20 and 40% of the benefits. There's also literature on formality or informality rates. Zarate finds a reduction of 4 percentage points of informality due to new subway stations in Mexico. So what we're going to study is the effect on crime of a new subway station. And we also know that, that this is just a short latest publications between the connection between labor and crime. There's evidence that homicide in Brazil increased following trade liberalization. So regions that experience more benefit from trade liberalization exhibit a greater decline in through a decline in tariffs, exhibit higher homicide rates. There's evidence in Mexico and manufacturing job loss, and even in Denmark, the job displacement increases the probability of committing a crime. So in a rational choice framework, there are several effects or channels. One of improved transportation, one could be that it attracts crime. So it provides better access to the neighborhood from other places, so people can come and commit crime. It also affects through the journey to crime, so you can have access to better places to commit crime. You can go to more distant places or reach neighborhoods that were not connected before. And the third channel is through job opportunity. So a subway gives you better access to formal jobs and may induce a switch from the illegal job market to the legal job market and reduce crime. So the evidence, some of the evidence has looked, well, most of the evidence really has looked at what happens in the aggregate number of crimes or crime rates in the places that receive the subway. So neighborhoods that have better job access usually, well, sometimes see a reduction in crimes, in property crimes, drug-related crimes. And there is a paper that shows that job access can explain 20% of differences in property crimes between Black and white neighborhoods in the US. So I was reading the chat. So the issue is, what is the driver? And as Santiago was pointing out, there is a recent paper by Kana and several co-authors. So this is preliminary work, but they do have the working paper, and they do something similar with a cable car in Medellin. So they show reduced form evidence, and then they go and estimate a full model of the city and study the effects of the cable car. So what they find is a reduction of crime originated in poor, high crime, segregated neighborhoods. And so the overall effect is very heterogeneous. They find all the reductions in these very high level crime areas, and in the other neighborhoods they even see or find a small increase in the low crime neighborhoods, right? So this is by far the closest paper. We're doing a reduced form only. We don't have the same level of data as they have, but I think we still can make a contribution using a similar strategy, differences, but in a different context. So Medellin is, the crime type and rates are very different from the ones in Santiago. So what we do is study the effects of a network expansion on different crime outcomes. We have a data set that has the location of the crimes and the alleged perpetrator's home address. And we estimate we have a diff in diff model with fixed effects, the geographical unit and year fixed effects, and try to directly test this job opportunity mechanism that, as far as I know, Kana in Medellin is the only other paper that has this type of data and study this. So the question is, does crime committed by people living near the new subway station decrease? That's what we are trying to answer. Or more generally, is there such a change or switch from the illegal job market to the formal market when accessibility is improved? And a preview of findings. What we find is that better subway connectivity does decrease crime committed by people living near the new stations. And in particular, we see that robbery falls between 30 to 50%, 30 to 50% after the inaugurations. We see a negative effect on other property crimes, such as larceny, burglary, but is significantly less robust. And by looking at different distances from the stations, we think we have evidence or suggestive evidence of an overall decrease in crime and not reorganization of crime, which is one of the main issues in this literature. So let me give you some background of what we're studying here. Is the expansion of a line. In this figure is the yellow dots connected by a green dashed line on the east side, in the east side from north to south. It's a quite a large expansion, and it was inaugurated at the end of 2005. And it connected the richest part of the city, which is in the northeast, with the south, where a lot of workers live, basically. The source of our data is from the police. We have from 2005 to 2010, the crimes, incidents, day, time, place, and also the address of the alleged perpetrator, which probably I'm gonna fail at this, but I try to use neutral language. So accused or arrested, participant, but if I say criminal, it's just because it comes. So, and the grouping of crimes that we do is robbery, which is basically with some degree of violence or threatening, but not causing injuries. In Spanish is robo con violencia o intimidación, or robo con fuerza. So different from larceny, which has no violence or is basically by surprise. Vehicle theft, burglary, just in a place. And we don't study these two categories of injuries, which includes homicides and all other types of injury, and intra-family violence. So unlike in Medellin, the homicide rate is relatively low. So I would say it's around probably 3 per 100,000 inhabitants, compared to, I think now Medellin is like in a historical minimum of 20 more or less, or 20 plus. So we didn't have much action in over there, lots of zeros, and we focus on these other types of crime, which we also think is part of the contribution. Study the substitution between robbery or larceny and the formal job market. So the strategy, we first decide to use grid as the geographical unit. Of course, there is always this trade-off between the size and the number of observations. The municipality and the census zone are too few, and blocks are too small. So we use this grid of 250 meters by 250 meters, which is useful because it's within walking distance and easy to test the robustness. So we see what happens if we increase the size of the grid or we decrease the size of the grid. The downside is that it's more difficult to build covariates income or population. And we use the distance between the centroid of the grid to the nearest metro station. So this is an example of how the data looks like. So these green dots or hexagons, if you're are really good at looking these pixels, these green circles are the stations, and the criminal addresses are the pink triangles, and the stars are the crime locations. So we focus on the pink triangles. And here you see the aggregation over time of all crimes, all types of crimes. Just to give you some insight about the distances, most of the crimes, especially robbery, occurs really close to the home. So you see maybe 40% or some in there, 60% occurs within 1 kilometer of the home. Similar with vehicle theft and burglary, but larceny is much more dispersed. And what we estimate here is the standard diff and diff, where we define 5 categories based on quintiles of distance to the metro station. So we build a bandwidth of 5 kilometers, and instead of dividing like first, second, third, fourth, fifth kilometer, we use quintiles to have a more balanced, less arbitrary, if you want, segregation. And we interact these with the post which is the years after the inauguration, and this dummy is 0 for 2005, excluding December, which is an already treated month. We have year fixed effects and grid fixed effects, control for time invariant characteristics of the places. And we cluster the errors by rings of distance to the nearest station. So these intervals, following what Canada and co-authors do in Medellin. And the covariates we use is mainly baseline level of prime for the grid. So to begin to make this credible, we have to test for parallel trends. And this is how the results look like. So we have these 4 types of crime as dependent variable, number of crimes per grid, and we have omitted the furthest quintile from the station, which is slightly over 1 kilometer, and have these 4 coefficients. And we see no evidence except if for this burglary in the closest kilometer, where you see a 0.024, fewer crimes, significant at the 10% level, but I think it's safe to say that there are no pre-trends. And this is the main results. So this is the estimation, and what I want to highlight basically is this first quintile. This is, I think it's 1.1 kilometer. Yeah, that's the first quintile of using the observations, and we see a reduction of robbery, vehicle theft, and burglary. Also in larceny, but not significant at conventional levels, right? So,
Whoa.
and yes.
Last 3 minutes.
Last 3? 5.
Yes, 5. It's okay.
Thank you. No, I'm fine. I'm gonna hurry up. So this is the main result, and I'm gonna tell you, perhaps not show you, that it's pretty robust, except mainly, sorry, for robbery. So the strong reduction in crimes happens in the closest quintile. It's robust if we increase or decrease the size of the grid, we change the definition of post, some subsets of years. If we estimate a Poisson, everything is robust except burglary. And if we use a treatment, a reduction in proximity instead of this discrete categorical treatment, it only also survives. If we only focus on crimes committed during weekdays, we find the same effect, which can be summarized to the robbery is a fully robust effect and a reduction between 30 and 50%, depending on which specification we use. This is the evidence that I'm gonna skip and just go to the discussion, making the point again that we provide evidence that better subway connectivity decreases crime by people living near the subway, walking distance from the subway. Robbery falls between 30 to 50%. Because we don't see any effects on the other kilometers, we think this is evidence of overall decrease in crime and not reorganization. We also extend the bandwidth that we study, and it doesn't change results. And what we are showing is that this job opportunity mechanism at play in more basic crimes. I don't think basic is a good word for it, but it's as opposed to focus on gangs or homicide or drug-related crimes. And one of the questions that is there is why we don't see an effect in larceny. And we think this is due to an opposing effect of a decreased cost of committing larceny, which is basically more people at hand. So because of the subway, you suddenly have a place where it's easier to commit this type of crime. I forgot to say at the beginning, this is preliminary work. We're still working on it. So all the suggestions, constructive comments, destructive comments are welcome. Thank you very much.
Sorry, my computer is about to collapse, but still working. Thank you so much, Hugo. I think we have some time for a few questions. Eduardo, I guess you.
Hi, yeah, I do. Yeah. More like sort of comments and questions. So you did a diff and diff, and the main, what do you consider to be the main channel of the reduction of crime?
Yeah, we think is the substitution of like occupational choice.
Yeah, so I mean, this is what you're finding, it's fine, but it is really surprising that you do a diff and diff, you expect to see the effects on short term, right? And I would expect that other effects on crime, for example, more criminal opportunities or easier access to crimes, would be the first effect to appear. And then with time, we would have the effect that you claim that is driving your results. I mean, it's sort of surprising for me that you find this as your main channel. And just to ask some other things, are you sure they didn't change the police locations, to protect it better, the metro stations or something like this? And yeah, I don't know if you have some other.
No, thank you. I can comment. So I think we can be more clear about the timing, because this what I showed is the posts, like considering all the years, and I can show
How
what
many
happened
years?
it's 5 years post. Okay, so I can show what happened in the first and second compared to the rest, but as far as I remember, there is no big difference. So
I think it makes more sense now, but I think it would be really nice, for example, if you found like in the first years there were an increase of crime, and then then you have a whole story to.
Yeah, no,
I think it's important to see each year.
Okay, and regarding, well, it's sort of related, but if there's another paper using a similar data, so not the origin, but only like the crime location, and with that data, you see an increase in some of these crimes, but crimes that happen near the subway stations, but whose origin, like home address of the criminal, is not nearby, right? So that sort of speaks against this worry, which is absolutely fair, that the police changed the strategy and of course is protecting the metro stations. But if you look, for instance, at larceny, you see that the crime increases around the stations. Yeah, but I think we used to have it, but we have changed the approach and haven't been able to reproduce this. I mean, to find a strategy to do it, but it would be great if we can test the channels like more directly. So see, we don't have employment rates, but maybe income or distance to work or some measure of employment from another source. But we cannot link this data to some administrative data that has the employment. But we'll try. I think is the main challenge now.
Any other question?
I do, but I don't want to take all the time of questions.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Now, just to ask if you compare, if you did like a placebo, looking at other metro stations in the same 5 years period to see, like the ones that already existed, to see whether there was some reduction.
No, that's something we definitely should do. We were thinking of doing it for places where a line open in the future, but our data set is not long enough, right? So we would need 5 more years to have this other line, but we can definitely see what happens around all stations. That would be a good check. Thank you.
Any other? We have time for an additional question, comment. I have one question. It's not a question, actually. It's more like a comment. So, if I notice it correctly, I mean, you have an event study style different. You have different periods before and different periods after treatment, right?
Well, so it is one line, so it's one event. And I showed you the specification, like with not a yearly dummy, but just a dummy post and pre.
So only one that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The other question is related to, a comment is related to, you show some statistics related to where criminals commit crime, how far from where did you get that? This from your own paper?
Yes. Yes, you mean like the density function, we have
Yes.
we have the observation has the origin and the destination of the crime, yes.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
And when you said home, was the victim's home?
No,
Exactly.
no. The criminal home.
The criminal home. And how?
Yeah.
Yeah, Carlos.
How do you know it?
Well,
how do you know? I mean,
well,
it seems to me a very hard data to get, like the home
yes,
of the,
yes, it is, and I think they realize, and
even for
that's
the
why
police.
that's why we don't have more data or more years. One of the co-authors thinks this was a mistake by the ministry that they sent this data set, but so it's legal in that sense, but it's from the police records.
Okay. It's just that you're missing data must be very large. I mean, you probably have information on a lot of crimes, and maybe 98% of them you don't have the home of the perpetrator, right?
Right.
I mean,
absolutely right. Yes.
Maybe there is some bias on
yeah.
You know, I mean, just to be careful.
Of course. Yeah. I think I can.
Maybe there is a reason why you can identify the homes of these specific crimes, you know, and you're just looking at a very, very small share of your total crime.
I'll take a closer look. But yeah, I mean, I remember because we began this paper a few years ago, and now we're starting again. We looked at least in the temporal dimension whether there was some bias, and aggregate locations. So if the probability of observing the home address of a crime was higher in some places, and I'm 70% sure that there was no bias, but there's a 30% remaining that I need to be sure about.
Thank you so much, Hugo. Very nice.
No,
paper.
thank you for the comments and questions.
Wait, if we have more questions at the end of the session, we can.
I'll be here.
Perfect. Martin.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, so this is criminal capital persistence evidence from 90,000 inmates release. It's a joint work with Santiago Tobon and Maria Escobar, both from FI. And so the prison population in the world exceeds 10 million people. So every day, tens of thousands of inmates are released. And for example, just in US, more than 60K people exits every year. So we have an important inflows and outflows from inmates every year. So as we know, the central role of incarceration is to prevent offenders to recidivate. What we know as specific deterrence is to prevent the inmate from engaging in repetitive crime behavior. Nonetheless, we found, or the literature finds, that reconviction rates are pretty high all around the world. Faisal and Wolf find that reconviction rates in Europe and North America are about between 20 to 60%. And in Uruguay, Muñoz and Rossi finds that 1 in 4 inmates recidivate on the first day. According to this, literature says that incarceration could affect the probability of recidivism through several ways, such as changes in the severity of punishment, the probability of punishment, the increase of criminal capital, and the changes in the access to and the earnings of the legal sector. But we know very little about the specific deterrent and rehabilitation effects of incarceration. To address this question, what we do is to analyze the short-term impacts of inmates' releases on crime around prisons. As I was mentioning, we study the persistence of criminal capital, but by looking the effect of inmates' release on crime around prisons. Some preview of the findings, we find like 2 sets of findings. First, with that in specialized inmates drive the impact. So specialized inmates are those who commit the crimes, and the rehabilitation programs of education and occupation or longer sentences do not mitigate these effects. Also, we have 2 negative externalities. We document 2 negative externalities that we find adverse peer effects, and we document a drop in property values, and therefore a property tax revenues decrease. So this is the table of contents. How does the prison system in Colombia works? This is run by the IMPEC, the National Prison Institute, a branch of the Ministry of Justice. It consists of 134 prisons that held pre-pandemic 125K inmates by the end of 2019. This system is divided into 6 regional offices, and each regional office has little managerial authority, and also these regional offices are divided in judicial districts to match the Colombian judicial power. Finally, the system houses both convicted offenders and untried defendants in the same prisons. These are the 134 prisons in the 6 regional offices. We can say that all prisons in Colombia are in urban areas, and 9% of these prisons are in the large cities. And the most important fact is all the prisons in Colombia are overcrowded. On average, each prison can have the capacity to have around 600 inmates, but today is having around more than 900 inmates. This means an average occupation of 145% of the inmates. Also, we find systematic patterns of specialization. What we see here is that in each column presents the type of new crime committed by reoffenders that originally commit the crime presented in the row label. So, for example, for property crimes, almost 60% of the inmates reoffend in property crimes. For homicides, it's about 16%. And then what we see is that most inmates recidivate in the same crime. And the highest crime is what is property crimes. That is the crime that we are focusing in this paper. What data we use? We use three main sources: incarceration data from the INPEC. Here we have the stock only of inmates until 2013, and then every inflow or outflow through September 2016. We have all these socioeconomic characteristics, dates of entry and exit, and not only the prison where they are, but all the information of the cell that they are assigned, because this is what we can find the peer effects. Also, from police, from the Colombian National Police, we have the universe of crimes committed in the same period, and we have the geolocation data of all the prisons. From the incarceration data, we have more than 90K inmates, inflows or outflows, and more than 250K crimes reported in this prison. What we do is to assemble a prison day panel data from 2013 to September 2016. With this prison day panel, we construct two sets of variables, our treatment variables that can be a intensive or extensive margin by constructing a dummy variable, whether if there is any inmate release on a day or not, or the count of inmates released. And with the crime data, we construct our outcomes that are the count measures of the number of property crimes reported around the prisons on a given buffer. We use 5 buffers from 1 kilometer to 5 kilometers. And in an alternative specifications, we use exclusive tunnels. Descriptive information suggests us that there is an important trend of recidivism, because we plot the average number of reported crimes per quarter within 5 kilometer buffer, and we have 3 lines. Days with no inmates, the dotted line, the first line from the bottom. Days where inmates specialized are released, the continuous line, the top line. And a third line, that is other offenders are released, but no one is specialized in property crimes. And what we see is that crime days are higher, or the average property crimes are higher the days that specialized offenders are released. So what is our research design? The first thing is how inmates are released from prisons. The formal procedure is quite straightforward, is specified in the Colombian legislation, and is almost the same for convicted and trial offenders. The process has 2 steps. First, judicial authorities issue a court order requesting the release. Then the prison authorities verify whether the inmate has any other kind of depth with the judicial system or with other authority, and then they have the process from medical checkings, and then they release the inmates. So with few exceptions, we find that this process happens within the same day. Also on trial defendants, the process is the same, but the verdict could lead to a non-guilty verdict. So they release the inmate. A guilty verdict when the inmate could be released if they serve the time, or if is convicted, just is kept in the prison. What we see, our preoccupation here is if the release is quasi-random. So the first two columns are the descriptive statistics of our sample. So here some important facts are the 29% of the inmates any given prison day, are in prison for property crimes. 71% are new offenders. But the most important things here in the table are the individual test and the joint test. In the individual test, we try to mimic a balanced test from an RCT, when we have the coefficient and standard errors from a different regressions of each variable with the indicators of release and prison and day fixed effects. We find that prison characteristics are not systematically correlated with the prison release. So characteristics in the prison are more or less the same, release or not release days. Finally, we do a joint test where we have a single regression of an indicator for release day, our main treatment variable, and all these variables simultaneously, and the fixed effects. Here we report the p-value of the joint test of the newly hypothesis for all the covariates, and these results suggest us that there is no systematic correlations between the decision to release and the current prison characteristics. So this is the estimating equation. We have a traditional diff and diff model where you have the number of crimes reported any day T in a prison I with a given buffer or an exclusive donut, our treatment variable that could be the intensive or the extensive margin, prison fixed effects that allowed us to control for unobserved prison characteristics that do not vary over time, such as managerial capacity of the prison director, and time fixed effects that allow us to control for unobserved day characteristics. Also, the errors are clustered to the prison level. So as our main specification resembles to a traditional two-way fixed effects, we have to hold to conditions to have a causal interpretation of these results. As Goodman-Bacon documents, we require parallel trends assumption and that the treatment effects do not vary over time. In our setting, we think that the quasi-randomness that I have presented before suggests that the parallel trends assumption holds, and also due to the nature of the process, that because we have thousands of inmates released over thousands of days, we do not expect the treatment that vary over time. So what are our results? As I mentioned, the dependent variable are the property crimes, the reported property crimes around each given buffer, and we have a positive and significant effect for all the cases in whether there is a release or not. So, and from the panel B, we have the intensive margin, where what happened when one more inmate is released. What we found is that there is more crime the days that inmates are released. In Panel A, then 5 kilometers buffer, there is an increase of 16% on release days, and for the intensive margin, there is an increase of 10% in crime per each more inmate released. What we found, we split our treatment in two variables, whether the inmate is specialized or is not specialized in property crimes. And what we found is that inmates specialized in property crimes are those that are leading the driving the effect. Sorry. We can affirm this because we calculate the p-value of the difference between both coefficients, and in each regression, we found that both coefficients are different. So as the result hold, we can affirm that specialized inmates are those who are driving the. So what are our heterogeneous treatment effects? First, improvement in human capital. What we have here is columns 2 and 3 is the count of specialized inmates that are released. Columns 4 and 5, the count of inmates released meeting this condition. For Panel A, is inmates who are enrolled in prison-based educational programs, and for Panel B are effects for inmates that are enrolled in occupational programs. Finally, columns 6 and 7 are the count of released inmates that meets both conditions. In the first case, the inmates specialized in property crimes and also enrolled in prison-based educational programs, and for Panel B, specialized inmates that participates in occupational programs. What we have here is we do not see that improvements in human capitals, mitigate these effects, because when both conditions are hold, we have an increase in property crimes in any given buffer, but also as with at least we do not find an effect. The third result here is the same logic of the table, but with above median incarceration spells, because there is this traditional theory that we need longer incarceration spells. But what we find is that longer incarceration spells measured as serving above median do not decrease the crimes committed around the 5 buffers, but the specialized inmates continue driving the index. So until here, we have found that educational and occupational programs do not help. Also, incarcerations, more incarceration time do not help. And finally, we have 2 unintended consequences. Here is the same logic, the number of specialized inmates, the number of specialized inmates that are serving time along with the specialized inmates, but are not specialized inmates, and both. Here we document adverse peer effects, because here the effect is drive, but those inmates that are released that are serving time, along with offenders in property crimes. So those who serve along with offenders specialized in property crimes are committing more crimes in the 5 kilometers buffer, because they kind of learn from there. But also, specialized crime that are serving time with more specialized criminals do not find an effect. Finally, our last finding is that we document that crime incidents are dropping property values, and then this imply a loss on property tax revenues for the state. So there is a lot of literature on the relationship between crime and urban characteristics of the cities. The work from Glaser is the leading in that way. Also, Morales Mosquera calculated the elasticity with respect to crime of property values for Bogotá, Medellin, and Cali, and find that is 0.24. So if we assume that this elasticity is constant across urban areas in Colombia, properties are losing around 1% of their value as a result of the prison location. With this value and using cadastral data, we estimate that the aggregate effect of prison locations, of the current prison locations, there is a loss of $16 billion on PPP, and this value implies a root loss of 78 million per year on tax revenues. So finally, to conclude, setting a prison system is a high cost for a state, for the taxpayers. So it's essential to ensure that this system is working as intended. As I told you in the first slides, for incarcerated offenders, the prison should decrease crime at what we know as specific deterrence by rehabilitation and incapacitation. We find that in some contexts, these mechanisms work, but our results suggest that for the Colombian context, these mechanisms do not hold. Why? Because the context plays an important role. As I mentioned, prisons in Colombia are overcrowded. In the last 30 years, there have been an continuous overcrowding. Also, because of the specialized offenders, our results suggest that specific deterrence and rehabilitation for these specific highly trained criminals do not seem to work. And as stated by Toban, the context plays an important role. As I told you, rehabilitating offenders in highly overcrowded prisons is almost impossible. And finally, our results suggest that we should test our practices in fragile contexts as the Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. We have 5 minutes for questions, comments. This is a question by Juan Pablo Martinez. Did you control for the overcrowding?
No, but this is something that we can check. Thank you. So we can calculate the overcrowding for each day of the prison, so we can control for this.
I believe this would be quite useful because maybe a higher overcrowding is related to a higher reincidence, because maybe like the supply of I don't know, education and work for the prison is lower. So even though these programs exist, they do not meet the objectives that they are intended to.
Yes, this could be an important point because as IMPEC works, each rehabilitation program, even if education or occupational, have like a number of slots available. So if a prison A have 100 slots, they only train 100 inmates. All the rest of the inmates can't access. So to the program. So those inmates are out of the rehabilitation program.
Any other question, comment? Everardo, what would be the alternative policies that might diminish the reincidence?
Well, I think that's the holy grail of the public policy in terms of prisons and recidivism. I think that, as I told you, that we have to test more incarceration practices, other kind of programs, and other kind of visions of incarceration. For example, the overcrowding is a very big problem, and maybe solving the overcrowding could lead to a better work of the rehabilitation programs.
I have a question regarding the estimation. So just to clarify, your control group are like donuts surrounding the area of the prison. Is that correct?
Our control group are prison days where there is no inmate releases.
Okay, so but you can, so just to understand, so you could do like a difference in difference using control, the control, like donuts surrounding the prison as your control group, right?
Yes. Those donuts in the
As you
day.
increase the area, you could increase the distance of this ring. I am sorry if I'm not getting it. Right, so your unit could be, so you can have different geographical units. One, you have a prison, the other, you don't have a prison. Pre-treatment would be without releasing anybody. Treatment would be when you release. And then your control group would be like, or maybe you can do matching. Maybe if this area, this ring are too close to the prison and maybe affected also by the treatment, and you could go and use further away areas that are similar to the prison or the surrounding of the prison. Sorry if it's not what you have in mind, or if I'm not understanding what you really want to do, but maybe it could help.
No, this is really interesting. Maybe we could chat a little bit more, because I think that this other specification that we can try to find more robust results.
Absolutely. So Martin, you have more questions in the chat. Maybe you have time for one or two questions.
Juan Pablo Martinez asked me if controlling for the supply of rehab programs. This is a problem because even the impact don't know well what programs they are offering. So there is no like a good list, a good data set of the programs that they are offering in each prison. And Everardo Telles asked, did you test using lagged or forward days? No, that is another thing that we can try. Thank you. We can use lagged or forward days of inmates release, but as you might know, there are several days in the week that at least one prison is releasing inmates, so we can try this for each prison.
Okay, so what we can do is I could present now, and then if you have more questions regarding my paper or Hugo's paper or Martin papers, we can have some minutes at the end of the session to wrap up and discuss. So let me share my screen. Okay, so this is a paper that we've been working for a while, and as you will see, we still need to figure out this is more like a method paper or a crime paper. So we will try to answer a crime paper, but maybe we don't have enough information, data, or insights to really address, for example, the mechanism behind the results. So maybe we are still working on the framing of the paper. So just to give you some details on what is behind the scenes. So this together with Matias Cataño and Rocío Titunic, the basic idea is to try to take advantage of a change in the penal procedure here in Uruguay and see if that really affected the public safety. So what we are going to do, and this is why we think that this could also be a more method paper, we are going to use a regression discontinuity design, but we are going to tailor this design to address our question, which is not coming from this question has time. Regression discontinuity is is tailored, is thought to be used for cross-sectional data. So we need to tailor this design to adapt to the problem that we are facing. What we find is that due to this change in the criminal procedure, the use of this new penal procedure code, we find an increase of 21 to 24 police reports per day, which accounts for about 25% of the average annual increase in the number of reports. And we observe a heterogeneous effect across crimes, and we are going to try to address this and discuss this in detail. So what happened in Uruguay is not new for Latin America. There was a change in 2017. We switched from an inquisitorial system to an adversarial system. I'm going to try to explain you a little bit what I mean by one and the other, so we are all on the same page. But the reform started in the early 90s and include most of the countries in the region. Actually, Uruguay is one of the last to adopt this type of criminal procedure. And there are different studies that have tried to understand how a criminal procedure could affect crime or criminal behavior, and we could identify three main factors: the perception of probability of punishment, intertemporal preference. Maybe, I mean, you as a criminal, you discount those crimes that or the result of the crimes that are happening later in time, and that could affect your decision today. And of course, the severity of punishment. I think the first and the third one are the most important, but these are three of the most important reasons why a change in the procedure. We're not talking about the punishment. We're not talking about the penal code. We're going to talk about the procedure, how you get convicted, for instance. Know the punishment itself. So what we say this is a major change. When we have an inquisitorial system, we have a single judge who is going to lead the investigation and also is going to decide if the collected evidence from that investigation is okay or appropriate to punish someone. Okay, so the same person who is leading the investigation is going to decide if the evidence is okay or not. In the adversarial system, you have now two parties. On the one hand, on the one hand, you are going to have the prosecutor who is going to accuse the defendant, and then between these two parts, you're going to have a lawyer, a a judge who is going to be now a referee. Okay, so it's pretty clear that this new adversarial system is less prone to abuse, seems to be more fair. The problem is that sometimes we could observe some unintended consequence when we introduce a new code that like this one. So this is a little bit of background for you. On the left-hand side, these are bus stop billboards that you could find in Montevideo in 2017 before the new code entered into force, highlighting the transparency associated to the new code. And then two different newspapers highlighting that crime was a big deal in Uruguay. Not only, I mean, maybe, not maybe, in general, it's a problem in Latin America. Uruguay, not the exception. And for those days, Uruguay was discussing this as a serious issue. And this is maybe the most appealing part of the paper, I think, because the visual evidence is pretty I think, in my opinion, robust in the sense that you have there, the dashed line is the moment that the new code entered into force, and then you have the days from that day, and each dot represents the number of police reports, considering the top 6 crimes in terms of incidents, that they account for about 90% of the total report the police in Montevideo receive every day. And you see a clear discontinuity, or it seems to be a clear discontinuity, 2 levels, when you look at both sides of that dashed line. But first of all, we need to be careful with this, that because we are going to try to discuss public safety, but we are not able to observe crime, we observe report. So maybe there is something related to report that's also affecting this. And these are these 6 crimes: theft, domestic violence, damage, robbery, threat, and personal injury. In some cases, it's more clear than in others. It seems to be that theft and robbery explain most of the effect that we observed in the previous slide. And this makes sense because they account for 60% of the total number of reports, 2/3 of what we have here. And what are the potential drivers behind these results? Well, one reason is that a new penal procedure could change the severity of punishment. With the new CPP, we have a procedural alternative to oral trials that could result in lighter sentences. And also they have been widely used by prosecutors. 90% of the cases were solved using these alternatives. And also the probability of punishment could play an important role here. So first notice that prosecutors, they face a totally new role under the new legal system. They are the ones who are in charge of the investigation now. It used to be the judge, now are the prosecutors. And then also they face a new role and an increase in the workload. So these 2 things could affect the performance. And also, if we look at the national police, they have to conduct investigation under new supervisor. It's not the judge anymore, now the prosecutor. So that could also affect the results. And also notice that we are going to focus on the very short time. So we are going to use regression discontinuity and the effect that we are going to try to capture at the cutoff. In other words, our immediate effect. So this more evidence related to this first day of the new code. The press in Uruguay was saying that it was really chaotic, really hard to implement, coordination problem between police and prosecutor office. And prosecutors were basically, they complain a lot because of this new workload. And this basically, I mean, two things to sum up this. First, there were a lot of problem between the prosecutor office and the union. And one of the most, I mean, one of the milestones during all this, the sequence of the event was one day when one prosecutor passed away at office. Basically, they claimed that was related to this new workload, a lot of pressure, etc. So the primary question of this paper is try to see if this sudden increase in police report could be explained by the new code, and try to see if we can say something related to the mechanism, and try to see if, and this related to the mechanism too, or potentially related to the mechanism too, if we can see something different when we compare different type of crimes. What we are going to do is we're going to use regression discontinuity design. The problem with this is that, as I said before, this design is suitable, originally suitable for cross-sectional data, and we're going to use time series. But it's good to try to adapt this, particularly because Rosillo, Matias, and co-authors, they've been working a lot, and we know a lot about this setup. And there are several characteristics that I think they are interesting. So first of all, we can define a local causal parameter, which is nice if we want to identify a local effect. We avoid parametric assumption, which is also very important, I think, in this type of analysis. And last but not least, we can specify assumption in terms of potential outcome. So the setup is pretty standard. I will just comment on the assumption that we need to be careful we satisfy, and some problem that we could eventually face because we are dealing with time. So we can, I mean, we have two approaches: the continuity based approach and the local randomization approach. In this continuity-based approach, we need the continuity assumption, that is that the conditional expectation function to be continued on the score, this function to be continuous on the score at the cutoff. Then we basically have this local randomization approach, which is, the idea is basically that you have on the two sides of in this case, these two moments, the fact that something is below or above the cutoff is not basically it's not a function of the score variable or the score. One of the problems when we think about this setup in terms of time is in terms of time is basically that we could have other confounders, in particular time confounders, that could also affecting the outcome. For instance, day of the week effect is pretty standard, so maybe there is something else that is happening at the very moment we switch to the new code. For instance, maybe we have more crime one day of the week than other, and in that day we introduce the new code, and that is why we observe or the jump or part of the jump, and our results are biased because of that. So these are the RD plots, and we are using global polynomials instead of local polynomials, and we observe something that seems to be consistent with the idea that there should be, or there could be an effect due to this new code. And And let me show the point estimate and several robustness check, and try to discuss a little bit the potential mechanism. So these are totally biased. What we need to focus on is on this panel A. We have different, in all cases, we have data-driven procedures, so we can balance between, in particular, we need to be close enough to be precise and reduce bias, but also we need some power. That's why we use these approaches. And also we use with one or two selectors, so same selector on both sides, or let each side to have a different selector. And the point estimate are number of police reports per day. So for Montevideo, this is pretty big. So more or less, as I said before, at 25% of the total increase that we observe for example, the first year of the new code. And then in this case, we use a linear method and triangular kernel. Then we switch for a local constant method. Of course, the coefficient increase. The p-values are in parentheses. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Then we use a local quadratic method. In some cases, we have a point estimate that are not significant anymore, but still this seems to be robust. We change the way we weight the observation that are getting close to the cutoff. And still we get, of course, different results, but that are qualitatively comparable to our main results. And in most of the cases, they are still statistically significant. And also we would like to see some placebo cutoff. So what happens if we move the actual cutoff to day 30, 45, 60, and 75 days before, or the same 30, 45, 60, or 75 days after the implementation of the new code of penal procedure. And as expected, we don't see any effects. Sometimes if we have negative effects. Now we do the same, but changing the way we define the bandwidth. And the other part that is interesting here, as I mentioned before, is try to deal with these potential time confounders. And we can use local randomization to try to deal with that. So first of all, what we could do is we need to define the correct size of the bandwidth. And what we usually do is, when we have cross-section, is to use some covariates to get balance between both sides. So we try to see that these covariates are balanced. So we decide that size or pick that size for the bandwidth. But in this case, we have time, so we can use the same period of time or the same moment for different years, and look at the output and see if for which bandwidth, for which size of the bandwidth, we could have balance. And this is what we actually did. On the right-hand side, there is no balance. This is November 1st, 2017, as expected, because the new code was implemented. On the left-hand side, we have the same date, but for a year before. And we see that we get balance until about between 22, and then we start getting closer until to 16 of days. The problem here is that the closer we get to the cutoff, we have a decrease in the number of observations, okay? But still, we have a point estimate that are statistically significant, even when we get close to the cutoff, really close to the cutoff. And then similar in terms of magnitude to those we found before. I'm running out of time, so let me show what we did here. So in order to pick up some potential time confounders, what we did is on the first three graphs that you have in the first line are the same. The ones that changed are those below. And on the x-axis, you have different bandwidth size from 5 days until to 60 days. And of course, the cutoff is set at November 1st, 2017, but then below we set it at the first day of November in 2016, the first day of November in 2018, and then we get all November 1st from the 5-year period between 2012 and 2016. And when, as you see, there is actually there is no effect, and if when we pick some effect, these effects are considerably lower than those that we pick here from the same bandwidth. And then maybe it's not related to the beginning of November, maybe it's related to the day of the week. So what if we look at the first Wednesday in October, or maybe the first Wednesday in December? So these are the two placebo, and again, we find or a negative effect here, or maybe we find some effect after 30 days, but still these effects are very, very relatively small to those that we find for the same bandwidth size. And just to finish, one of the potential mechanisms associated to this is related to incapacitation, or is potentially related to incapacitation. So on the left-hand side, you have police population is the full line, and the dashed line is, sorry, prison population is the full line, and the dashed line are the police reports. And you see at the moment, the new code entered into force, an important decrease in prison population. And this was the first time in 10 years that prison population decreased in Uruguay. The main reason behind that is preventive detention was widely used before, but now with the new code is only used in very specific cases. Some people claim that because of that, after you was caught, in particular for theft, for robbery, no, because you have violence and you could be put behind bars, waiting for the judge to decide in those cases. But for theft, it's very strange now, unless you were caught before. But this is your first time, you will be automatically released. So the number of potential active criminal could increase, or could have increased because of the new code. But this is, I mean, this is just speculative. And this is consistent, this idea is consistent with the result we find by type of crime. We see no effect in robberies, but we do see, and by domestic violence, when you have violence, and then preventive detention is still used, but there is no effect for theft, where preventive detention, as I said before, is not common now with the new code. So that's it. I don't want to use more time in case you want to say something, comment something, or discuss or have questions related to Hugo's or Martin's paper. So thank you so much. I don't know if you have any question. I will be more happy to answer it. Again, for me, for Hugo, for Martin, we have 5 more minutes before the end of the session.
Just a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
So once again, I think it's like your first plot. I mean, it's done. You don't have to do anything more. But it's just understand the channels. But I mean, it's still hard to buy that criminals reacted that fast to. I mean, I see much more as a learning process that they would eventually feel that its like severity and probability of punishment changed in favor to them, but not like the next day after the law, like they were waiting, right? Okay, we're waiting now we can commit crimes.
That's a good point. And of course, we address that in the version of the paper we have. We are observing reports, so we are not observing actual crime. We cannot say that. I mean, it would be very hard to say that because of the new code, now the number of police report increased because now the people trust the police more, and then they have more incentive to go and report an incident to the police. That's really hard to learn. Maybe something else happened in terms of how the police change or report the incidents. To be honest, there is no change in the way this has been processed. The only change that took place, it was related to the fact that now the prosecutor office needs to know immediately that an event took place, because they need to decide to investigate or not. That was not the case before. So now the statistics that are produced by the police are going directly immediately to the prosecutor office. That could affect something, because now you have someone else watching the statistics that the police is producing, right? I didn't show it, but there is one case in Uruguay. It's not in Montevideo, it's a smaller city, where this new system entered into force, and it was earlier the new code was implemented, and we see no effect there. But again, maybe there are other reasons, and I understand that maybe it's not related to that they are learning. Maybe it's related to the fact that, I don't know, the police is not as efficient as before to pick. They are not in the streets, or they need to solve some problem. It was really chaotic at the beginning. Again, this is more speculation than actual findings. And that's why I said at the very beginning that maybe we need to think about more of methodological paper to see that we are able to show that we are able to address the effect that we see in the first figure. But yes, Eduardo, I'm
and just related to this, do you know how discretionary it is, like for the police to say, okay, this was a property crime, this wasn't a crime, and so on and so on? Do you have an idea on this?
Well, actually, it's pretty standard in terms of theft. For instance, for theft, it's pretty standard the way, I mean, the problem I think would be that maybe they are dismissing some type of incidents because they're used to do that, and now they have no chance, and they have to report it. When I talk to some people at because the police will not admit that, of course, but the ones that have a lot of incentive to say that is the main reason why we have this jump in crime are the prosecutor or the prosecutor office. We're saying, oh, this is great. This is a short run effect, and most of this short run effect is coming because of statistics. And they don't say that, even off the record. I mean, I can say it, but they never told me. I talked to a lot of prosecutors, and they don't say, okay, that if there is something, it shouldn't reflect that. Could be something very specific, very local police stations, not probably Montevideo, maybe in the rest of the country, in a town where the sheriff has control of everything, but in Montevideo, it's harder to believe. I cannot say it's not possible for sure, but it's a very important, a good point, Eduardo. Any other comment or questions regarding any of the 3 papers? Okay, so we've run out of time. Thank everybody for being here. Very nice. Thank for the questions. Thank for the presentations. Hugo, Martin, very nice papers.
Thanks to you too, and for leading the session.
Yes.
Thank you all. And Martin, I'm more than happy to talk.
Yes.
Hour later, we can exchange emails if you want, or we can talk now, but it's up to you.
Yes, maybe we can cross emails and talk about this.
Up to you. I will be more than happy.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank